What's up, everyone? Happy Tuesday. I believe it's February 6th, if I'm not wrong. So happy February 6th. Happy Tuesday. It's nice to see the four of my folks being here watching me right now. Hopefully that will grow as it usually does grow. Few things. Where today's guest that we're gonna have on is Paul, which his last name I really cannot pronounce. I cannot say it anymore that I just don't know how to pronounce his last name. Leszczynski, something like that. But I thought he was going to be an interesting guest to talk with because he recently released a book called "Of Why I Left the Left: How the Democratic Party basically is maintaining funding the rich." Is his main idea, his main thesis for the book, and I thought it'd be fun to discuss and talk about that, as I am someone who has only moved left over the years. So that'd be an interesting conversation to have. Another thing is I'm going to be going over my conversation with Cenk from Sunday. I think I have a lot of things to say on it, a lot of things to clarify, a lot of things to correct. And maybe as I go and watch over it, a few things to learn myself, and maybe we can do a little research together. I also want to say that I'm glad that people are appreciating the cat TV, right? Birds flying in the winter months. That is fun. That is cool. I think it's a little chill vibe, other than get some Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson videos running in the background. I think that's much more entertaining, actually, the cat TV sometimes, than that. Brings down the energy, lets people just relax, some sounds of nature. uh, I like that. Also, Friday, I'm actually going to be having a guest on. It's a little out of the ordinary. The only time we could fit her in was Friday. I'm actually going to be talking to Destiny's ex-wife, Melina. It's usually outside of the things that I talk about on this channel, but I think that it's going to be very entertaining and very illuminating for a few reasons. One of them being is that you haven't really seen the side of me that majored in psychology. I don't really talk enough about it on the show. I've talked about more trans issues and things regarding that stuff, which has some intersection with psychology. But I think it'd be interesting to talk about relationships, specifically her relationship with Destiny, and a lot of things about what happened there. Why is it that it did happen? How did it happen? What are the things that he's been saying that is wrong, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that'd be a fun conversation to have. Other than that, things are great. I don't know, for those who don't know, the UFC right now and the MMA community is just, it's great. The fights are fantastic. The fighters are fantastic. And I really hope that right now the UFC can maintain this momentum and become a legitimate organization and not happen what happened last time. They had like a high end global sponsor like Reebok, to have the whole nightmare that happened with Conor McGregor and Khabib, and the steroids from John Jones and hitting a pregnant woman with his car. All of that. Hopefully that's in the rear view mirror and that combat sports can be entertaining once again. Uh, I mentioned a second ago that I used to be much more to the right, and I think that just I think a lot of people sometimes experience this shift. For me, it was really because of Donald Trump's election. It was going to school, getting more educated about different topics, and mainly it was really living religion that has made me move more to the left as opposed to the right. But uh, Paul, whose last name I cannot pronounce, I will say that again. I don't know how. I have to ask him how to pronounce that name. Um, King Dandan. Oh, Travis is in the house. That's what's happening. Hey, Travis, how you doing? Yeah, so Paul's last name, who I cannot pronounce, Leszczynski, but he released a book of, specifically, I want to get the exact name, is Why Left the Left, How the Democratic Party Takes from the Poor and Gives to the Rich. So that'd be really, he should be coming in anytime now. So he's going to be our first guest. And then afterwards, we're going to go into the review of the conversation with Cenk. Here, let me read you a little bit of the summary of what it says on Goodreads, reads before he comes in. And he writes this as a summary. It's the easiest way to become a Republican is to live as a Democrat in California. In his book, he says, I chart my course from an ardent liberal who worked for the Democratic Party to a newly formed conservative. What was the cause? And on living under progressive governing, malfeasance, in the state of the high rent, homelessness, overregulation, overtaxation, rampant crime, and insane cost of living. He says, as Democrats, we spend our time angry at the cost of living. We're angry at Republicans for whatever storyline is being played out in the media at the moment, when people who are really responsible for the problems we face are the Democrats that we keep electing into power. Yes, HGI. It's true that Reebok has been a disaster overall for the fighters, but it was also a step forward in legitimizing MMA. I think that it's hard for us to imagine that MMA is still seen much more as a barbaric sport as opposed to the legitimate sport. Uh, and that was kind of a way of legitimizing it. I do think that while the sponsor with Reebok was hurtful for the fighters, it was also good for the brand. And I think both things can be taken simultaneously. I would like to see a legitimate sponsorship. I also don't want to see an exclusive sponsorship, but I believe the fighters should be allowed to wear gear with different things on it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Oh no, I'm getting people are messaging me on Discord saying, "Did I leave the left?" I don't know if I can right now leave the left. That's what I believe. That's how I think. At this moment, I'm not interested in leaving the left whatsoever. I don't even know what that would mean. The left is like a descriptor. It's not a group I belong to, but that's all right. See, it's that type of like mentality of, oh, I left the left, I joined the right, I became a Republican. That's kind of indicative of more than just ideology. It's a lot more like, oh, I have my group, my side. But before we have Paul come in, he should be coming in any moment. Hopefully, he didn't forget or the link isn't broken. I'm going to resend the link to our not manager, to see if there's any issue. So I just sent it just in case, but they should be coming in anytime soon. But for me, a hard thing, and I think this is something that I'm going to have to ask him a lot about, is about why Republican, right? It's I can understand saying I disapprove of the Democrats, but for me to jump sheep and say therefore I approve of the Republicans, well, we know the history of that party. We know how that party behaves and what that party does. Keith Fire says, leaving the left oftentimes is deciding to dedicate yourself to be anti-woke. Maybe. But it's the becoming a Republican part that's interesting to me. Right? I think that's the part that I'm not really sure how I can contend with that. To become a Republican. The Republican Party is not any better than the Democratic Party. I mean, I argue repeatedly that I don't see a pathway to reformation within the Republican Party. I don't see it as possible with a party that aims to disenfranchise, loves its gerrymandering. Listen, the Democrats do it as well, but I feel like within the Democratic Party, we don't have people trying to erode democratic practices in the country, and the Republican Party, right now as it stands, does. Could that change in the future? Sure. Would that change my opinion? Absolutely. But that's not the current case. We had a President Trump. I mean, I feel like I'm rambling, right? I've said this so many times, but for those who have not heard me say this before, the Republicans and Trump as a whole really did take serious anti-democratic measures to try to make sure that they win the election, making voting harder, literally trying to decertify legitimate votes, creating conspiracy theories about Dominion voting machines, frivolous lawsuits, wasting taxpayers' money, inciting an insurrection. And obviously, this is still debated in some areas on the internet for no good reason, but so is flat Earth and so is creationism. Um, Still waiting for a guest. So before that happens, let me maybe someone sent me this article about something that happened in Michigan. Michigan school shooter mother found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. So real quick, I need to make a new scene and kind of get that all sorted out. So while that's happening, let me ask you guys a question. Do you, if you have any videos that you want me to react to in case this guest doesn't show up, send them in the chat or send them to me on Discord so I can pull them because I got to recreate the scene in this program we're using. So give me 1 second of that, please, while I try to get that set up. I always apologize for this. This was not expected, so I'm trying to pull an audible. What comments did I get? Shapiro rap vid. Okay. Oh my goodness. I did watch some of it, but I will react to it. That's fine. I will. So give me 1 second while that's everything is fixing itself over here. Yeah, that was a weird little video glitch. Okay. So what does Scott write here? Right. Oh, H. Human said the Shapiro rap vid. Okay. But before we do that, I really do want to go over this article. I think the person who sent me goes, America went full fascism. I'm always skeptical of statements like that, but I will try to see what they mean, what they want to talk, what they have to say about the issue, and if that is actually a legitimate way to explain the situation. Let me go ahead and do that. Give me 1 second. Okay. Here. So while we're still waiting on the guests, and if they don't show up, we'll try to reschedule and see what's going on because that's always upsetting. But let's see this article. So Michigan school shooter's mother found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Interesting that you say that. It's refreshing at first when someone decides to leave the left. I actually find that that entire statement within itself highlights the way in which they even think about this issue, leaving the left. I don't see that as a helpful or even legitimate way to think about politics. What changed? When you say you're leaving the left, what really changed? Are you not left anymore? Are you Republican? And does that mean you can't be a left-leaning Republican? There's a lot of things I don't understand. There, for example, people argue, right? People argue that um, conservatism, for example, right, is a right-leaning thing. It's a Republican thing. Well, when it comes to the environment, leftists are pretty conservative. They're trying to conserve the environment. They don't want it to change. They want to maintain the status quo. They want to maintain things as they are, as Republicans seem to be more okay with the opposite. So conservative plus not conservative is a bit different. What's up, Garrett? How you been doing? How you doing? It's nice to see you. It's nice to see you. So yes, here it is. So let's go keep going over this article. So Jennifer Crumbly, the Michigan mother accused of involuntary manslaughter when she failed to inform her 15-year-old son's high school that the family possessed guns shortly before he went to campus and fatally shot four students and injured six, including a teacher, was found guilty of all charges on Tuesday afternoon. The verdict marked the first time a school shooter's parents had been convicted of homicide in connection with the underlying violence. It came after jurors on Monday began deliberations in a case that would shape the future criminal liability of parents of underage mass shooters. The maximum penalty for involuntary manslaughter under Michigan law is 15 years in prison. Damn. Crumbly was accused by prosecutors of gross negligence for failing to tell Oxford school officials that the family had guns, including a 9mm handgun that was used by her son, Ethan Crumbly, at a shooting range a few days earlier. So my question, like automatically, is that is there an obligation in Michigan that they must notify a school that the family had purchased guns, right? That is, I think, an important question to recognize that. Did she know about it and refused to not do it? Was she negligent, they said here, and just ignored the law? Was she aware of the law? Was it disseminated in a fair fashion, right? I can imagine a situation where they do have this obligation, but it's a newer law. They didn't hear about it. It wasn't communicated fairly, right? Sometimes government officials will send you a letter in the mail, a very plain piece of paper that's not really clear, and you don't read it and you move on. Some new law change, you had no idea, and you went ahead and were negligent about it. I can recognize that. And in that scenario, if that was the case, I don't know if I could agree with this judgment. But if they were aware about it and it was clearly communicated, negligence is negligence. And if under law that's a thing, that's a thing. The school's inquiry came after it became concerned about a macabre, how do you pronounce his name? Macabre drawing of a gun, bullet, and wounded a man, accompanied by the disturbing phrase on the math assignment, "The thoughts won't stop, help me, the world is dead, my life is useless," the 15-year-old had written. Damn, that's hard shit. But during a 12-minute meeting with school officials, Crumbly, 45, and her husband James, who is scheduled for a trial in March, had not informed the school of the weapon at home, and Ethan was allowed to stay in school. Later that day, November 30th, the teenager pulled the gun, and 50 rounds of ammunition from his backpack and opened fire. He literally drew a picture of what he was going to do. It says, "Help me." The prosecutor, okay. In addition to the knowledge of the gun, Crumbly is accused of ignoring their son's mental health. Prosecutors pointed to a journal found in their son's backpack in which he had written his parents ignored his plea for help. They also presented evidence that Crumbly had group sex parties at hotels with a firefighter chief who was having an extramarital affair with her instead of addressing her son's mental health. I mean, damn, this is crazy. "I have zero help for mental health problems, and it's causing me to shoot up the school," the boy wrote. Ethan, now 17, pleaded guilty to murder and terrorism in 2022, acknowledging he had knowingly, willfully, and deliberately chosen to shoot other students. He is now serving a life sentence. The parents of the shooter have been in jail for more than 2 years, unable to post a $500,000 bond while awaiting trial. Soon after the charges against them were announced, they fled their home with $6,000 in cash. Just on the face of it, I don't have that much of an issue with this precedent. And I'll tell you why. I think people might be really angry at me for this. We don't hold children fully accountable for plenty of reasons. And we also need to hold parents accountable for when they fuck up with their kids. Right? And I think this is a very clear mistake. It's a very clear negligence in their son's well-being. Imagine if we had a child who had a driver's license, for example, and their parents, they were suffering from seizures, or they would pass out, they would fall on the floor, they would have this problem, and their parents let them drive, didn't take care of the problem. The parents are the guardians of that child. They're on the road, they get into a seizure, and they kill someone. Who's responsible for it? Well, if the parents knew and had a legal obligation to make sure that their son was safe behind the wheel, then they could be charged for that murder, right? And in this case, if the precedent is clear, if the law is clear, it shows that parents do have a responsibility to address their children's mental health issues, just like any other health issues, make sure that children with mental health issues don't have easy access to weapons and firearms, because the result of that is what we're seeing. So on the face of it, without doing any much research, and my first reactions to this, so if someone thinks, oh, you're an idiot, whatever, just know that this is my initial reaction to something that I've not seen before nor heard before. Okay, our guest seems to be 15 minutes late. I'm going to assume that there's either been a miscommunication, they forgot how to use a computer today, their internet fucked up, and I think we're just going to move on with the second section of the show, which is talking about my discussion with chunk yogurt, as I like to say, but really it's Cenk yogurt. I was surprised, actually, for everyone who's watching, I was surprised at how well that conversation went. We really tried to make it really, really good faith. And I think that was a general W. Most of the things I watch with Cenk do kind of get out of hand because, well, Cenk is, for those who don't know, he's just Cenk. He just yells. He gets overexcited. He might be trying to convince us that bestiality is okay if the animal likes it. Many, many, many things like that, as Cenk likes to do. That was inflammatory on purpose, yeah. You guys do know that he did that, right? I think it's like the 15th time I've ever said this. But yeah, let me pull that up. Okay. Let me get this. Share this tab instead. Oh, but his face is blocked out. Let me see if I can make this a little smaller. Ah, there we see good old Cenk's face. Okay. So for those who don't know, this was done on the Pangburn Hangout, which I do every Sunday on the main Pangburn YouTube channel. It is me, Travis, John, and Cenk join us. Usually just me, Travis, and John. We go over different things, different ideas, and talk. I take the token lefty position on the board. John takes the token righty position, and Travis just tends to mediate and talk about what he's interested in. So here, let's listen to the conversation, react to it, and just have a chill time. Cenk Uygur. Hello, Cenk. How are you doing? I think you're above introductions. Most people know exactly who you are. You're one of the people who've pioneered online politics with TYT, and we're very excited to have you on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Happy to be on. And I like that non-introduction. It's it's an interesting form of respect. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. As people know, you're famous for saying "of course," which is another thing. I just want to point out that one of the things we really strive for is good faith and helpfulness in conversation. And while we're going to have disagreements, and that's an important part of being in society, the most important thing is to be able to talk through those disagreements in a way that's not trying to get a gotcha. It's not trying to insult people. It's really here to just talk about your opinions, your news, and just have a good conversation. I hope you understand that, and everyone here respects that. That's like the main idea of this entire podcast. Is to have So the reason why I actually opened with that up, it was really just to try to get him in the space of, we're here not to have gotchas. We're not here to try to catch you in a corner. And I think that Cenk is so used to operating with people who are dishonest and so used to operating within those spaces that his initial reaction is to think that people are trying to get him, is that people are trying to get gotchas at him, that people are trying to pin him into a corner. And I think he does that a few times throughout this conversation, from my recollection.
I instantly don't accept it. I demand bad faith.
Oh, okay, fine.
And I will exercise it throughout. No, look, seriously, I totally appreciate that. And there is a lot of bad faith out there. So yes, honest opinions, let's exchange them. Love it.
Amazing. One of the things, and I hope you don't take offense, when I had a conversation with Cornel West and I spoke with him, we spoke about his run for president, and the reality is that his chances of winning are very low from the get-go, and yours were as well. Overall, I mean, it's shocked, right?
I didn't see that coming.
did you really think, like, what were your thoughts of, like, how much did you actually think they were actually going to get to the main stage and have a debate, and like what were your aims in this entire run to begin with?
Yeah. So, first of all, there's two things that I'm always amused that people don't realize, right? When people are like, "Oh, dude, man, you're not gonna win." Like, yeah, I know that
I have to say that when he does that, I gets really cringy. uh, I don't know if he's trying to be hit. I don't know what he's trying to do. It doesn't, to me, it just comes off as like X, but whatever.
it's not overly likely. Yes,
Mhm.
I'm very aware of that, right? So it's that fact did not escape me. So, but thank you for reminding me.
Of
I would
course.
say to the average person who writes that in, or the average troll that writes that in. The second one is, dude, you didn't even read the Constitution, man. It says you have to be born here. Like,
I
yeah,
mean,
no, I
it
know. I
does,
read it.
guys. It does say that you have
You
to be
don't know
born.
anything about constitutional law. Okay, but fine. So we can get into that later if you like. But so so why did I do it if I know the chances are very, very low? And I would say that when I first got in, the chances were somewhere between 1 to 2%, which and so you could say that that's way too high, and we could talk that through, right? But
Now, if the truth is that he really had a 1 to 2% chance of winning presidency, you should take up that chance, right? Let's just be real. If you truly have a 1 to 2% chance of winning the presidency, that's like if I told you have a 1 to 2% chance of winning a lottery ticket. I mean, I do say that in the discussion. I would go for it. Wouldn't you go for it? Who wouldn't go for it?
I thought if you got a 1 to 2% chance of changing the world, you almost have a responsibility to try. Okay, now let me explain why I thought it was that high, right? To
Mhm.
give you a sense of perspective on what's possible and not possible. The reason is, so I'm a naturalized citizen. And so that most people think, oh, you're not qualified to run because of the Constitution and the thing that I was just joking about. But the reality is that according to 14th Amendment jurisprudence, there's actually a good chance that I would win a case like that. And I'm in the middle of a case like that. And so that sounds like a giant hurdle, and it is. And that lowers your chances significantly. Hopefully, otherwise, it would be a little bit higher than that. But what it also does was it provides an opportunity for you to pull off a miracle, or what's perceived as a miracle, when in reality, that 14th Amendment case is about 50-50, if you ask me. And I know others disagree and have it at different percentages. So if I had won that case, or if I win that case going forward, then all of a sudden it changes the entire dynamic of the race, because here's a guy they said doesn't have a chance, but just pulled off what appears to be a miracle and has put himself in the game, right? And then
So to me, when he was saying this, and my point wasn't to be rude with him, I thought it was a little bit like, wow, I could pull off a miracle. I could be this, hit it out of the park. Of course, I have to go after that. It's a bit unrealistic. Again, I could win the lottery, even if it was 1%, 2%, I'll still do it. But I'm not coming out of that believing that I have a duty to do so, because I might. Um, I think that's a little. I think that there could have been a much more productive use of that money. We didn't talk about that, but that's what I was thinking.
and people thought I would start at 0% in the polls, because they're like, you're not a politician and you're an online talk show host. And whenever we see you, you're yelling. You got no chance at all, man. Right. So, but Quinnipiac put me in a poll and I was at 2%. Again, is 2% a giant number? Of course not,
No,
guys.
no,
Of
of course
course
not.
not. Right. But that at the
Of
time, it was beating two
course.
Republican governors, and it was on
Mhm.
the board. It was on the board in a way that people did not expect at all. So if you take that, and if they had kept putting me in polls and I got on media and I won the case, there's your slight avenue for a Luke Skywalker shot into the Death Star,
So
right?
you're like, you know something, I might as well go and buy the lottery ticket. If I have a 2% chance, who would not buy a lottery ticket at 2% chance?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like, think about it, right? If you buy a lottery ticket, you have a
Uh,
whatever
but if I had
1%
a two
chance.
percent chance, I would buy it. Would you? I
Yeah.
mean, who wouldn't buy
At
a
a
lottery ticket?
2% chance at a
At a
lottery
50
ticket, if you're going to win $100 million, what are you, nuts? I'd tackle you if you didn't buy it, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
this is better than $100 million, at least for me. The idea that you can actually bring a little bit of change in the world, or if you win, a ton of change, and fight for the average American, fight for peace, fight for all the things that we care about, fight against corruption. And then, of course, there's another giant part of it, which is that even if you don't win, you're providing an alternative that people almost never get. And someone who's honest, who's not a regular politician, who doesn't have to kiss the ass of.
This is something that I'm only hearing at the end of the someone who's honest, who's not a regular politician. I just want to make it like very, very lucid for people. People who are generally trying to run for politics are attempting to be politicians. So it's almost like, if you did get elected, would you not be a real politician? And therefore, would you not turn dishonest? There's a line here. A lot of what people perceive as, I think, dishonesty in politics is simply trying to maintain coalitions and being a representative to those who you represent. And in that way, you have to kind of become this figure, more than just a private person, but a public person. And in this public personality, especially one where you're a representative, you can't just act by the whims of your own feelings and wants and drives. You have to take into account the wants and drives of those which you represent. And I think a lot of people see the dishonesty there. And sometimes it's not the worst thing, right? Would you rather have a representative which is trying to represent the needs of their constituents, or a representative who's only doing that which they only think is their opinion about what is best for their representatives? And here there is a tension that I think exists, and it's hard, it's hard to articulate.
Of his own party, and so and pretend that the leaders are geniuses and have done everything right, and so American politics is not really used to that. If you're
also, they really got to desaturate this guy's camera. He is so saturated, so blown out. It was like, it looks like the White Brigade next to this like orange creature. Is that a thing? Is that why Trump dyes his face? Is the way to get into politics, become an orange person? Maybe.
If you're a Democrat, you have to pretend the Democrats are 100% right. If you're a Republican, you have to pretend Trump, the lunatic's 100% right, etc. Well, I don't pretend any of those things. I'm just honest with people in a way that surprises them. But as it turned out, right now, we lost the first round of the district court case.
Yes, Thomas.
Mainstream media 100% stonewalled me, but I appreciate guys like you having.
Mainstream media 100% stonewalled me. I wanted to say something so bad about that, because that is the cry. That it's the cry of the machine is against me. Mainstream media is against me. They're stonewalling me. He was complimenting us. We appreciate you having on. Yeah, but we'll have a conversation with anyone, right? So, I mean, I had a conversation with what's his name, Buck Angel, who's a trans porn star. So.
Me on all the way from Piers Morgan, Charlemagne the God, you guys, Destiny, all these other folks, Hassan, and so we're getting the word out the best that we can. And at this point,
I do have to say,
I'm trying to do is
I do have to say, right? He did just compare me to Destiny and Hassan, so I'll take that.
Agree with me on Gaza, but they got to write me in Michigan. But in Vermont, and Minnesota, two very progressive states, I'm on the ballot on Super Tuesday. You get to 15% and you get delegates. And all my delegates are going to be for peace and to make sure that we end the slaughter in Gaza.
I had a quick question for you. Is that I heard a soundbite that, along with trying to win and along with trying to provide an alternative, that you were also potentially trying to weaken Joe Biden and maybe help with another candidate. First of all, am I remembering correctly? And if so, I would love for you to dive a little bit more into that.
Yeah.
If what John said is true, even before I heard Cenk's response, my response, but like, that's a mistake. Why would we weaken one of the only chances we have against Donald Trump? I don't understand that. For me, Trump is a way more existential threat to American democracy and American politics than Biden. You could disagree with me, but if you believe what I believe, you don't want to weaken Biden's chances.
So, first of all, there's a million theories online. So, I mean, if you heard that, you probably heard 28 other ones. So, yes, the way that mainstream media and the establishment works is, if you don't bow your head to whoever is the quote unquote leader of that party, and they pick the leader, sometimes it's logical. Like in this case, it is. Joe Biden is already the president. He's the incumbent. So I get why they're selecting him. In the case of Hillary Clinton, she was not the incumbent, but they picked her anyway. And they said, no, she's going to win. And Bernie Sanders is a disloyal jerk who's destroying the Democratic Party when the people in power had already picked the most corrupt.
I can't tell if Cenk really thinks about politics this way, an annoying jerk, and the mainstream media and the narratives. Or if this is just the way he talks about it, because on its face, it's disturbing to me that this is how he thinks about it. They just didn't like him because he was an annoying jerk. No, they have funding, they have avenues. There's a whole systemic reason for why things are the way they are. It's not just he's a jerk, and that's something that's very difficult in conversations with him. That he tends to simplify things to to the point where they become banal. His analogies and his explanations don't really make any sense in a political way. They just kind of make sense in a we're at the bar chatting type of way. And that's not always the best way to talk about something.
Corrupt Democrat, the most establishment Democrat, and we were already planning to lose with her. And of course they weren't. They thought they were going to win. They were a height of arrogance, etc. Right? So my first point is, yeah, I disobey. I'm proud to disobey. Who the hell is Jamie Harrison? He's just a loser that Joe Biden picked and installed at the DNC just because he would follow whatever the hell Biden says. Why should I listen to the people who have destroyed this country? So
do you find yourself sometimes being a bit of a contrarian? Like your initial intuition is kind of just to be a contrarian at first?
No, not at all.
No, not at all. But no, not at all. But he disobeys, right? And why not? It's maybe my word choicing of disobeying was wrong, but not at all. If your first initial reactions to disobey, well, as I've heard, who said this before? You're the herd of the other sheep. I don't remember who that was, but that's what that is. If your initial reaction is to disobey, you're like a kid whose initial reaction is mom says A, you do B. I don't know. Sounds pretty contrarian to me.
See, that's ironic. So look, guys, I know the establishment point of view. Let me just finish the point, earlier point, and then I'll come back to the contrarian point. The established point of view is if anyone ever dares run against the beloved leader that we have handpicked, we will destroy them and we will say they're trying to help the other side. But in reality, one of the things I just did is I appointed myself the Trump czar. Is that a real thing? No, I made it up. And what it means, though, is I'm going to kick Trump's ass and I'm going to do it 10,000 times better than Biden. And is that because, I want to get in good with Democrats? No, because I just don't want Trump to win. The reason I got in the race was because I was positive that Biden was going to lose to Trump. I don't care about Biden. I just want to make sure Trump doesn't win.
I mean, I'm 100% with you on that. I think Trump is an existential threat to this country. And that's something that scares me because I do see a future where he could be president again.
Yeah. No, guys. That's what. Look, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. There's a 90% chance he's going to be president again. And the polls are overwhelming. And so if you don't believe polls, you just don't believe in science. You don't get it. You're just burying your head in the sand and hoping that everything's going to be all right because Ezra Klein said it in a podcast, and everybody in mainstream media is a bunch of idiots who can't read a poll. He's down 35 points on the border, 22 points on the economy, 21 points on crime. He's down in every single swing state. He has to win by 5. He's down by 4 on average. He's down 9 overall. This is nuts. He's not going to win. Joe Biden is not going to win. I mean, look, I hope. And look, once the primary is over, and I'm going to try to pummel Trump to make sure that Trump loses. But
this is like that. The more I think about it, the more I see this sense, like this grandiose sense of self that he has, right? I'm the Trump czar. I'm going to take down Trump. I'm going to make sure that Biden doesn't have a chance of losing. Man, you just don't have that ability. You don't really have that clout. And it kind of seems to be going a bit further than what he really can do. A little bit, a little bit narcissistic, a little bit full of himself. But I think that's part and parcel with who this character is, who Cenk is as a person.
I can't, am I going to be able to pull it off on my own? I don't know, but I have to.
No, of course not.
Biden barely even campaigns against them. So these guys are losers. They don't know how to win. And the reason is because America hates the establishment, but the Democratic Party is run by the establishment. So they're like, what do you mean? Don't they love Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden? No, you cannot read a poll because they are just as deluded as hardcore MAGA. They're in a bubble that is detached from reality. And that is why they can't even read numbers. That's how incompetent.
I always say that the Democratic Party let Trump get elected as opposed to Trump beat them. in a sense.
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of that comes into play because the Republican Party was so disjointed, so all over the place, so much infighting, and still they could not stop that group from
100%.
asserting their
Look,
power.
I can come back to how to beat Trump in a minute, but let me answer your contrarian question. No, brother, there are folks like that, and Michael Tracy actually for a little while worked at TYT, and I'm not trying to start any flame wars or anything like that, but Michael at times felt contrarian. Like if there was a conventional wisdom, Michael was.
I had such an urge to bring up Dave Rubin, but I didn't. I didn't bring up Dave Rubin here. I had a serious urge, but I didn't do it.
Going to go in the opposite direction, but to me that makes no sense at all. And I'm sure he would disagree, right? But wait, sometimes conventional wisdom is right. Should you eat with a fork and knife?
Hey, but this is why I bring up like but then when you say mainstream media, it seems like, well, the mainstream, that which lies out of it, is contrarian. So like within, like, how would you go about figuring out whether the mainstream media is reporting something correct or incorrect, as opposed to saying it's mainstream media, they don't like it, they're against it? That itself doesn't seem to me to be like a helpful way to explain to people what they should or shouldn't believe.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I say that because it's the same exact question I asked Noam Chomsky. So if I asked it, it must be great. I'm just playing around. All right, seriously, it really is a solid question. And when I asked him, he said, "Look, because obviously Noam Chomsky wrote the book literally on this issue, manufacturing consent." And so I said, "Well, look, I get my news from mainstream media, and I know its downsides. I know it's massive downsides, but I got to get my news from."
By the way, this thread is going to be present throughout this entire discussion about what seems to me to be a really from this conversation that Cenk never really properly articulated how he tells what is fake news from what is real news, what is news that we should trust and what is news that we shouldn't trust. And he always seems to oversimplify it as either it's mainstream media and it's against me or biased, it's things that are reported from Israeli newspapers or Israeli sources and therefore are biased and can't be trusted. And at the same time, he does believe certain things from other news organizations and does trust them, when it seems like he just really does believe what falls within his narrative, which we're all prone to do. And it seems to be at the cornerstone of a lot of disagreement and a lot of issues that we had with Cenk.
Somewhere. So how do you read the New York Times? How do you watch CNN or whatever and distill what's reality from their, the way they warp the news for their own purposes, right? And he said, I only read for the facts. Anything that is framing, I dismiss, don't even read it. It's nonsense, right? And that's a pretty good guide, and that's what I do. So if they say X number of people have died in Gaza today, it's likely true, right? But if you read the framing around it, and The Guardian broke a really interesting story today about how CNN is covering Israel, and there's executives at CNN that demand that the reporters frame it in a way that is super positive to Israel. Hamas made Israel do this. Hamas is hiding behind.
Do you want to know what's one of the really funny things about what he said over here? If you talk to anyone who's like a rabid, like right-wing ultra-Zionist, they hate CNN. They say CNN is pro-Hamas. It's always pro-Palestinian. And speaking with Cenk and many other very far left progressives, they think the opposite way. And I find being stuck in the middle of that, it highlights something really interesting. I'm not sure what. I haven't really had the time to think about or reflect, but it highlights on something in which there seems to be an agreement. CNN sucks. Why? Because they either love the Palestinians or they love the Israelis. That's an interesting thing to talk about.
Behind human shields. Show the most horrific things that happen in Israel. Do not show horrific things that happen in Gaza, right? So I can read numbers. I can see what the United Nations is saying. So they're not, and MAGA and right wing are wrong. They don't get together in a room in the New York Times and just make up stuff out of whole cloth. No, they take facts and then massage them for their own point of view. And they don't do it because it's a conspiracy. There's no, well, at CNN, there's apparently memos written, but mainly it's groupthink, right? Yeah. And so they all assume Israel is right. The dirty Palestinians are wrong. Politicians are honorable and noble and wonderful, and they're having ideological debates. And the money in politics, the millions of dollars, doesn't affect them at all. At all. We're never going to mention it in the context of elections or legislation or why a bill passed. So I'm not saying ignore the facts. That's super important to getting informed. But if you look at their framing, it is 100% corporate framing to maintain the status quo, disguised as objective when it's nowhere near objective.
So one thing, Dandan, I wanted to know, Cenk, who are you trusting to get the facts from with what's going on in Israel?
Yeah, so first of all, I read it all, right? So and Guardian is terrific on it overall. The Lever and Intercept have broken some really good stories. And by the way, from time to time, CNN does a really good story. So Jeremy Diamond, I think, has been.
He says a lot of things, and it's hard to narrow down everything. But right now, not much is happening. Kind of listening to the preamble of the show. Hope you guys finding it interesting. I'm not trying to talk too much. I'm also trying to fix my vape. It's a whole other thing. I don't know why it was not working, but I just got it to work, which is nice.
Been terrific. And so the IDF has invited him in thinking, oh, CNN's in our back pocket for the reasons that the Guardian explained, right? But Jeremy didn't play along. And he broke stories about how, no, there are no tunnels under the cemeteries that they're destroying, etc. But overall...
And this is something he returns to a few times. And I did look it up afterwards. And there seems to be credible evidence and videos that I've seen, drone videos of the tunnels under the cemetery that they blew up, right? So I have a heart. We'll go over that. Let me actually write a note. Let me write a note on things that we need to look up and double check after the stream. One of them is the cemeteries under the tunnels under the cemetery. So I'm going to look that. I'm going to write that down, and we're going to look that up afterwards.
You be careful about what you read, because it's going to have that framing, especially from, and you could tell when you read international stories versus American stories, the framing is totally different. In America, it's completely favored. And I ask people, like in mainstream media, you think CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., they all accidentally have the same framing? No, they have a groupthink, a frame of mind. Israel is right. Gaza and Palestinians are wrong, right? Are terrorists. And so, but things are changing because younger reporters are rebelling. I mean, who do you think gave the leak to The Guardian, right? 6 journalists at CNN couldn't stand it anymore. So they leaked to The Guardian. And younger reporters are way better, because they didn't grow up on the junk of television, the pulp of television. They grew up online where you could look up facts.
One of the things that I think I want to get across is manufacturing consent, as Noam Chomsky. It also has an opposite factor of the manufacturing of dissent. Other powers, other interest groups, other groups with groupthink. Because I grew up in Israel, and what I hear from a lot of... So this is something that a lot of people on the left don't talk about, which is the manufacturing of this dissent. Powers try to manufacture consent, and there's also other powers trying to manufacture dissent. A lot of times, people like Tim Pool, Dave Rubin, Cenk Uygur, Ben Shapiro talk about the mainstream media, the apparatus of them brainwashing, trying to make you believe something. Well, what are they trying to show you? They're trying to manufacture dissent. They're trying to manufacture something else because they have a financial... I also have a financial incentive of making you come to me for information. But they're also trying to manufacture the dissent within your society. And that's extremely, extremely important to recognize. Very radical, right-wing religious nuts who always say, oh, that's the other narrative, that's... they have groupthink. They don't report right. They're rebelling against these groups. It's a good thing that we're winning here. Or like we have to rebel in England. England is against this, or CNN is against us. Because I hear a lot of people who are pro-Zionist being like, "Oh, CNN is all fake news. They're all pro-Arabic." And what's interesting to me is that you're saying that as well. And for viewers, how do you actually get about what is the epistemology of just understanding that there is both sides of the media, whether it be alternative media and mainstream media, have groupthink, have agendas that they're pushing? These things are very seldomly truly independent news. We saw what happened with the Daily Wire. We saw what happened with other left news organizations. They do have, at the end of the day, groupthink and biases and add people to uphold. So
yeah, look, you're not wrong to bring that up. I think that's a great point. So because we all live in our own bubbles, so the first thing you have to do is question your own bubble. So yeah, I mean, look, honestly, I think right-wing Israeli supporters are among the most deluded on the planet. The mainstream media will say that Israel's 99% right in killing 27,000 civilians, and they'll say, no, they didn't say we were.
This is one of the strawmans that I think was something that I should have challenged and should have pushed harder on. And sometimes the more I do it, the better I'll get on it, is that he paints a straw man of the opinions of the situation of what's happening. That every single killing, I have not found, okay, let's put it this way, I have not found someone yet who said everything Israel has ever done is 100% right. Maybe the odd Twitter comment, or Michael Rappaport, he did say that on Twitter, but he's like an idiot, no one cares. I haven't found people who speak about it, who even on the right, who say such a thing. So I wonder who he is constructing. Who is the they? This is something I should have hinted on. It's something I think I should have pushed back on. And if I talk to him again, I'm going to try to really get down to who are they? Who are them? And it's a really important thing that I didn't quite hit on in this conversation.
We were angels on top. Oh, they're pro-Arab, right? And by the way,
that's true, Thomas. He did ignore the epistemology question. He completely ignored it. That's correct. I see. Even now, I missed it again. I asked him what it was. He said you have to challenge your own beliefs, and he moved on. Maybe he is a politician after all. After all.
The other side will have their own bias, and we'll look at it, and they didn't say Israel was the devil, et cetera, right? And you see that in American politics, you see it in Israeli politics even more so. So what you have to do is
see how he had to say even more so. This is the building. This is narrative building. Even more so, he's gonna consistently throughout this conversation, when he mentions things regarding Israel at the moment, he will say even more so. Is it even more so than other places like Germany, England, Austria, Hungary, Italy? How about, is it more than mainstream media? Where? Chinese mainstream media? American mainstream media? Which one is it? Be very non-specific. He's going to do that a few times.
Verify, double check, and keep looking for what comports with reality. What actually matches what people are saying. So, for example, if you watch right-wing media in domestic politics, Candace Owens, for example, the other day said that Hollywood is yeah.
I died of laughter when she said that.
Right. Hollywood is run by the CIA on behalf of Satan. Okay, if you find facts confirming that, then okay, then you follow Candace Owens.
Yeah,
trust her, right?
I mean, I would also say it's a very big anti-Semitic dog whistle. The CIA is funding Hollywood, which is the Jews. Like, especially in right-wing circles, that's a very big dog whistle.
100%. There's a million.
I think it's really important to examine what's going on and try to have a sound epistemology that allows you to navigate through what's probably a lot of media bias. But I did want to ask you about something specific, Cenk, this issue of hospital bombing. Mm-hmm. Now, this one, I think you might be wrong on. I could be wrong about it as well. But on October 17th, you said Israel bombed a hospital, killing 300 to 500 civilians inside. Meanwhile, the intelligence sources from the United States, France, United Kingdom, and Canada are saying that
that's what I was saying earlier. He's so saturated.
An Islamic Jihad errant rocket. Have you changed your mind on that? Or
yeah, so that one's one of the toughest ones there is, and so I thought about taking that one down a couple of times, but not in the beginning, because first of all, there's overwhelming propaganda from the IDF. So if the IDF says something, there's no way in the world I would report that without it being verified by other sources, right? And probably a couple of sources. They are basically in the propaganda business. So when they said it, I was like, yeah. Because they say every bombing is angelic and they meant to kill only Hamas, but golly gee, they just killed 20,000 some odd civilians by accident because they have the worst aim in the world, total incompetent.
Right. So that's a straw man again. I can find examples. I remember examples where the Israeli government messed up and they were just saying we messed up. Right. That exists. Not every bombing that Israel has done this in the past. It has done it during this conflict more than one time, a few times specifically. So that is also the case.
Military, it's outrageous. Nothing they say is believable, right? But over the course of time,
nothing they say is believable.
Reports, and most of the reports started leaning in the direction
Sounds a little bit dogmatic.
It's probably Islamic Jihad. It never, to my satisfaction, we never got a very clear answer because there were still dissenting voices saying, I don't think it was Islamic Jihad. So that's why if I thought it was definitive, I would have taken it down. But I would challenge you.
But I want to also point out that after he tweeted that, the number went down from 300 to like 50 or to 50 to 100 people. And that also, he never double checked it. So I think Travis is really trying to poke at him and say, hey, you know, you are also someone who has done this spreading of fake news in media. Are you willing to be responsible and hold yourself accountable? And it seems like he's just trying to shake it off. He's not trying to take on the responsibility that comes with the responsibility to become president. And Travis is going to do something smart here where he tries to reframe this conversation as from the perspective of a voter, making him put on his politician's hat, which he claims to not be. It's a really good trick.
You back and say, let's say that I was wrong about that and the sources that I relied on were wrong about that. And it's going to sound like, if you're on the Israeli side, outrageous thing to say, but let's talk it out. What difference does it make? That was one of over 30,000 bombs that the IDF has dropped and admits to dropping. They dropped 2,000-pound bombs, which are and unguided bombs. They've slaughtered so many thousands of civilians. Yeah. Oh, wow. You might have been right about one of the bombs. Is that a big bragging point?
Well, I'll tell you why.
Hold on. Let me say one other thing about that. That's so important. Because they use that one example out of literally 30,000 bombs, now well over 30,000 bombs, to make it seem like, oh, don't trust anything that the UN says. Don't trust anything that reporters say. Don't trust we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything. We're so innocent. We're the most innocent people in the world. We're the most innocent military in the world. El Shifa Hospital, right? And then, well, how about all the propaganda of the other hospitals and the other schools and the cemeteries, et cetera? Well, they were 100% wrong.
Cenk really needs to have that kid, what is it that people say when you're a kid? When you point a finger at someone, you have three fingers pointing back at you. He needs to embody that a little bit and realize that he does a lot of finger pointing.
So I find it super uninteresting.
The thing that's important to me, as a voter, I would want you to leave it up if you truly believed it. And I'm not sure if you do, because it sounds like you're saying you're kind of leaving it up to make a point, it sounds like to me. But
no. That's absurd. Okay, so first of all, has all the reporters that got Israeli propaganda 100% wrong? Is CNN, and you read the Guardian piece, they just regurgitate whatever the IDF says. And then if it's proven wrong, most of the time they don't take it down.
They should.
But maybe like 2 weeks, 2 months later, they take it down when the damage is already done. So if you want to find one tweet where it's an 80-20 split, and I'm not sure, and it was months ago, you want me to go back and analyze to see if the 20% is definitely wrong? Fine, whatever. But
I'm just saying that. Well, I would want a president to go back and delete that if they didn't currently believe it, right? Like if they weren't convinced.
Or maybe put a comment, or maybe put a correction.
I agree with posting, like even reposting again if you're right about it, because don't you think that's harmful to leave up? And again, I'm not sure if you actually believe it. Do you believe that is correct information? Because if you don't believe it is, you should take it down.
No. This is false equivalency. So you're talking you've nitpicked a tweet that.
So Cenk is running 100% as Democrat, by the way, Thomas. But Travis is also right. If you don't believe something, why having it up? Why have something up that you're not sure of? Why have something up that you're only 20% sure of, 15% sure of, or maybe even just add a note? But if you don't actually believe it, why keep it up? I think it's very, very simple way to do things. It's what I should do. I recently had a conversation with a good friend about a tweet that my wording wasn't proper on, so I removed the tweet. It's not a big deal, right?
Then in either direction from
It's
months
just Twitter.
and months
X.
ago. So, okay, you know what? Fine. I'll go back and I'll double back and see if they got to 100% consensus on it, and I'll put a note on it if it requires a note, okay? But guys, when you focus on that, it makes it seem like people pick
apart what we're focusing
every
on?
single tweet.
Is that what we're focusing on? Because what I think we're focusing on is the epistemology. How do you verify your sources? How do you know what is right? What is the responsibility of keeping up information that you do know or don't know? That's obviously what we've been focused on. It seems that Cenk is thinking that we're focused on trying to get him, trying to gotcha him, right? I think he's very primed for that. I think he's very worried about that. I think this is something that happens to him a lot. And a lot of it is because if you see the way he acts on the internet, he's a prime candidate to do that too.
I have massively pick it apart. And I have thousands of tweets. And so you found one that is not
no one cares about
clear.
The tweets, though.
But everyone that's listening should understand that means there is tens of thousands of tweets of mine that are impeccable in terms of its fact basis.
Cenk, to be honest, I'm giving you the same critique I would give to Donald Trump. I nail him for this all the time. I nail Biden for it all the time. For me, I like a leader to be fallibilistic in the sense that they can go back and delete or correct something if they currently don't believe it. And again,
I just told you I'm not sure about it.
Well,
so
if you don't believe it, you should take it down.
Right? If you're not sure about it, if you're not sure about it, you don't believe it. It's like asking, do you believe God exists? Well, I'm not sure. Then you don't believe that God exists, right? Oh, yes, Scott. Cenk yogurt, chunky yogurt. That was a nickname my brother and I called him. I was going to see if I was going to ask him if it's okay that I call him chunky yogurt, but I thought he would take it a little too personally.
I just told you I'm going to go back.
Okay. I appreciate that. I appreciate that response and I respect it. Thank you.
I have a little bit of a small out of the way bit. So I actually started out as like very pro-Israel. Like I was believing a lot of what the IDF said. Now I'm very agnostic. I don't trust anything coming from anywhere. As you pointed out, in war there's propaganda. I'm curious though, are you screening for propaganda on the other side too? Do you take a similarly skeptical lens to propaganda from the Palestinian side? And if you do control for that, how do you control for that? Because I'm aware there's a massive power imbalance in terms of the ability to put out messages. But I am curious because you just didn't mention it, and I assume that you're doing it. So I was kind of curious to do that.
Yeah, honestly, when it comes from Hamas, their military or political wing, I don't believe it at all.
And that's funny that he says that, because if he believes that the bombing was from Israel, he's believing Hamas sources, not just CNN sources, not just the Guardian sources, because AP, Reuters, the New York Times, they changed their titles. So they went back and said, no, we made a mistake. It was an Islamic Jihad rocket. So if he doesn't trust the Israeli sources or the Hamas sources, why has he not changed his mind on
it? Does Hamas do propaganda? Of course. If you're on the Palestinian side, if you're on the Palestinian side and you think Hamas is angels that would never do propaganda, come on, brothers and sisters. That doesn't help your case at all. To say outlandish things. Both sides are obviously doing propaganda, and it's our job to suss it out and, to the best of our abilities, to deliver what is reality to the American people. So honestly, that's why, but on the other hand, when Israel says, well, everything in Gaza is run by Hamas, so don't believe anything anyone says, doctors, nurses, etc. That's nonsense. The United Nations has confirmed that the health ministry has roughly correct numbers and reliable numbers. Yeah. So if the guys on the ground that are independent confirm that, then those are the numbers I'm going to use.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's I would say, as much as I love true information and true news, I would also say in a weird way, I would feel like both sides aren't fighting the war very well if they weren't engaging in propaganda. It's almost to be expected at this point.
I mean, Machiavellianism is and all that stuff it's how the governments run. Governments are interested in propagating their interests and maintaining their influence. We know that's how governments work.
Can I just say one quick thing about that?
Yeah,
that's true of every government, and I
Yes.
need the viewers to understand that. So, like, look, I know when it comes to especially your own ethnic background, people get super touchy, right? I'm Turkish, so when I say things against the Turkish government or things that Turks might not agree with overall, they get super mad at me and they feel like I've betrayed them. But my job is to be objective. By the way, also true of America. So when reporters the other day they got mad at the Pentagon for clearly misstating something, right? I'm like, guys, do you not know that the Pentagon is lying like 90% of the time when there's a bombing or a conflict? Like, for example, when we bombed a wedding in Afghanistan and killed about, I think, about 84 people, they said, oh, no, we didn't. No, that wasn't us. And there was no wedding. I mean, everything they said was a 100% lie.
Yeah.
But it was all printed on the front page. Everybody consumed. We're perfectly innocent, and it was the dirty Taliban, dirty Muslims, whatever, that deserved it and had it coming, right?
Yeah, this is why breaking
2 weeks
news. We should
later,
all be
on
skeptical
page
of.
27, they issue a correction that nobody sees. And so it gets that's one of the reasons I get frustrated at mainstream media. If the Pentagon is saying something, it's incumbent upon you to triple check it, not.
And does Cenk not consider himself media? Because you see, he's consistently within the topic, kind of contradicting himself. Oh, this was the main. Then they go back 26 days and correct something that was wrong. Well, isn't that a part? Isn't that your Twitter? Hasn't TYT done the exact same thing? Where's your responsibility? Where's your record? These are things that he's not going to bring up, and maybe we should have pushed back on, but it's hard to do that. This is all in hindsight. Every time I watch this stuff, I think back to myself, oh God, I could have done so much better. You know when you cringe and watch yourself do something over? Ugh.
Printed as if it's true. And that's my government.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think that's just like a PSA. If you get news, just be aware that you should wait a little bit because news coming out right away is always going to be less factual than down the line when investigations have done and reports come through and you have more sources. That's just an important thing for people to know. People like to run from news source to news source. But one of the things that I know is true about you, because I've been watching you for a long time. You know, you've been very instrumental in. I was watching TYT when I was younger, and everything's around. Again, you're like one of the grandfathers of modern political online world.
Let's go Godfather instead of a grandfather, but I hear
fine, Godfather. I'll go with the Godfather. And you have you have gone through many criticisms around the Armenian genocide. You have gone through many criticisms and around. I mean, even that ridiculous, funny moment where you talked about bestiality on one of your streams. Your haters like to use it over and over and over again. And one of the things that you've done really well is say, well, these are embarrassing moments. You always fuck up on. You can fuck up on screen. That's just a normal part of people, or even changing your mind on thing. And without getting into a debate, because I don't think that's interesting or helpful, what would be like, because every claim that we make, every belief that we have should be fallible, right? That's how scientific inquiry works. That's how epistemology works. What would be the thing that will falsify your belief that what's happening in Israel does amount to genocide? Because right. So I made a huge caveat in that question, trying to remind him that he's fallible, that he has changed his mind, that this is a process he goes through. And I really wanted to genuinely hear what are the things that will falsify that claim. And just a reminder, and this is something that everyone should have, is if you believe something and you don't have a way for yourself not to believe it, there's no way that can be falsified. That should be a red flag that the thing that you believe is not something that you are willing to change or you are willing to not believe, and therefore it's really connected to your bias, and it's most likely some type of dogma that you're believing in. So if you do not have that falsifiability, you should not believe in the thing that you're saying. What is Preacher brother? Hell yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Appreciate you, bro. Thomas, for those who don't know, does his own show, and his show is super rigorous. He's just a philosophy, science, psychology nerd. And he literally, like, if you want to learn about whether it be, I don't know, linguistics or physics, Thomas is the guy to listen to an hour and a half who's going to break down the textbook. Really, really fun guy to listen to. Always interesting conversations. the ICJ has yet to finish ruling, and we can recognize that ruling. I'm someone who agrees with the international community. If that ruling says genocide, I would be like, that amounts to genocide. That's the ICJ's ruling. Whether do I believe it now, I'm very agnostic about it, so I withhold belief. I don't know if it amounts to genocide. It's definitely a horrific amount of people being killed. The civilian to combatant ratio is about 2 to 1, 2.5 to 1, which is high. It's normal for urban environments, but it's generally very high. What would be the thing that will falsify that belief for you? That would be like, something, I need to see X, Y, and Z to believe that Israel is not committing a genocide.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible at this point, but I'll try to get you an answer, okay? And I'll tell you why it's nearly impossible.
Thomas, don't make me cringe.
So Srebrenica
we messed that party, but he said it's almost impossible
at this point. But
it's impossible at this point.
Get you an answer.
I'm not okay with that answer, right? If someone tells me I have a belief and it's impossible at this point for me not to believe it, I'm not okay with that answer. Well, sure, then tell me what it is. What is this? Is this that impossible, right? When I was religious, I would tell you it's impossible for me not to believe in God. I was wrong. When I understood the economy through the lens of Austrian economics, right, like a gold standard, I thought it was impossible that someone was going to convince me that government spending was a good idea. I just couldn't even fathom. Like, no, that means that I probably shouldn't hold on to that belief. I shouldn't have. And as I learned more, that belief changed. So.
Okay, and I'll tell you why it's nearly impossible. So Srebrenica was considered a genocide by the United Nations, and 6,000 Muslims were slaughtered by the Serbs. Now, the Serbs did not have the intent to kill every Muslim in the world. That's 1.6 billion people. They would have had no capacity, and they did not have the intent to do that. But they targeted the Muslims there for being Muslim, and hence it was a genocide. People often get genocide and Holocaust mixed up, and actually the Turks get that mixed up more than anyone else does, right? So the Armenian genocide is clearly a genocide. There was ethnic cleansing, there was massacres, and they were targeted because they were Armenians. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that they were trying to kill every Armenian, but they certainly targeted them based on the fact that they were Armenian. So that's the definition of a genocide. And so when people say, "Oh, Cenk doesn't believe in the Armenian genocide," it's total nonsense, total, utterly, completely not true, right? But when I was younger, I believed Turkish propaganda, so I understand, like, why they might make that point out of an honest mistake. Although these days it's mainly just trolls who know it's not true. But also why people's ethnicity and their background could blind them, right? So in terms of what Israel's done so far, massively disproportionate killing of civilians. Are they targeting them because they're Palestinians, and as opposed to a general targeting? Well, obviously, there's no one but Palestinians there. Are they? And so the reason why it becomes nearly impossible is, one, it's much bigger massacres and ethnic cleansing than Srebrenica, which is already a genocide. Number two, there's already been massive reporting from New York Times, CNN, etc., that shows they're dropping 4 times the size of the bombs that America dropped in Mosul, as an example, in an urban area. So that shows intent.
This is something that I took the time to read on, and I consulted someone on our Discord. For those who don't know, join the Discord. I think it should be in the description. And he has expertise in military, artillery, ordnance, etc. And one of the things that we discussed was that even if a bomb's size isn't everything that relates to how big of an effect it's going to have, right? So, for example, if you're trying to like get an area of effect over the ground, you're going to do what's called an air burst. You're going to actually blow up the bomb before it hits the earth. But if you're going to do an explosion that's in the ground, like if the bomb hits, lands, embeds itself inside the terrain, and then explodes, the explosion is going to be very, very different and have very different needs and different results. One of the things that I was reading on West Point's website was about the idea that a lot of these bigger bombs are used to attack bunkers underneath the ground, and that's where they get first embedded and then they blow up. And just because the bigger bomb is necessary for the mission at hand. If the mission is to do an air burst, yeah, that size bomb would probably be ridiculous. But if your mission is to target something that's 30 feet underground, and that bomb is on a specific, gets embedded underground before it blows up, that's a very different thing. I mean, it's an important distinction to make.
That you're not trying to target your the kill zone is huge for a 2,000-pound bomb. They're dropping unguided bombs. They've destroyed, I believe, about 70% of the buildings in Gaza. If so, in order for me to believe that it's not a genocide, 85% of Gazans are displaced. Somebody would have to prove to me that either they didn't drop those bombs and the buildings are still intact, and this is all one giant Black Mirror episode, and a quarter of the people of Gaza are not starving, and 27,000 didn't die, or they did, but my God, we were totally wrong. It turns out 25,000 of them were Hamas fighters, and yeah, okay, 2,000 civilians, which is a tragedy, but my God, they really targeted Hamas very effectively. But it looks like the ship has sailed. None of those things look like they're anywhere near true. So they would have to just.
Burden of proof shifting. Elaborate on that, Thomas, in the comments. I'm not following you exactly, but I felt when he was saying that he didn't really take into account, well, what is the sufficient condition for being genocide. And for those who don't know, necessary conditions are the things that you need in order to have a conclusion, to have that conclusion or belief. Sufficient is that which takes it over the curve, right? So, for example, let's just say, prove to me this is not happening in Gaza. True. That is shifting of the burden of proof. He didn't give us what would be the otherwise thing that would disprove it, that he would have to look up. Just you figure it out. Which is fine. It's similar to the way Matt Dillahunty answers about God, which is also like a shaky question, but it's fine. Where was I going with it? Oh yeah. So for example, let's say you committed murder, right? The question is, was it you're being charged with murder. The necessary conditions for murder is that there's a dead body. Without a dead body, you can't even begin to address murder. That's a necessary condition. A sufficient condition would be your intent, your proximity. That would be a sufficient condition for believing that you murdered someone or murder has been committed, right? I have a body. That's a necessary condition for murder. Then there needs to be signs of foul play, etc., etc. He has yet talked about the intentionality, the foul play. He really is talking about brute numbers. And this is where him and I are going to get into a bit of a tiffle about.
You see what I'm saying? Like,
I hear what you're saying.
Plausible scenario.
I think that there, might be more things to consider, like a combatant non-combatant ratio, compare that to other conflicts, because as much as it's like horrible to say, and it's like, death toll might be a necessary condition for genocide, but it's not a sufficient one, right? It's like you need to kill people to have a genocide. It needs to be a significant amount of people, but that itself doesn't denote genocide in the same way that the destruction of buildings is sufficient but not necessary. What is for you, like, when I see things like, I misspoke there. The destruction of buildings is necessary but not sufficient. I misspoke there. Damn it! I hate when I misspeak. Like, from my perspective, leaflets being dropped and humanitarian corridors and them calling in advance and telling areas to clear. When I hear that, and that's not just Israeli propaganda, that's facts that are happening, I think to myself, well, that to me is indication of anti-genocidal intent. No. Right? So, what was I saying? I heard a noise and it distracted me. Yeah, that's what I'm. There's more, right? There's 4-hour pauses for humanitarian corridors. There's maps and information. These specific statements that RAF leaders are made, and I don't believe that. Some people get mad at me. I don't believe that it's a genocide. I believe it's a horrific war. I believe there's tons of murder, but I don't think there is a genocide being done. Do I want to see this happening? No. Do I wish that there were any civilian casualties? Absolutely not. I do believe that Hamas is a problem. I believe that Israel's right-wing government is a problem. I think the Israeli policy have been a problem. I think that Iranian policy, Jordanian policy, Lebanese policy, I think that all of these have been a serious problem. Putting it out there very, very clearly, but I do not think that it amounts to a genocide. And I think that a part of these solutions are dismantling the institutions that have led this to happen. Iran, Hamas, Israel's right-wing government, the Likud, like all of these organizations need to be absolutely dismantled. No question about it in my mind. I know you might disagree here, but I wonder why would you disagree? How is that not evidence for intent against the fact?
Okay, so brother, when they were dropping leaflets and knocking on doors like a decade ago, 2 decades ago, I thought it was plausible, and I would report it as, well, it's better than not doing that, right? And so it gives people a chance to maybe leave the building, etc., right? But this is not like that. They destroyed the entire North. It's gone. It's obliterated.
But did they?
And then they said, hold
leaflets or
on,
not?
hold on. Then they said, we're not going to bomb the South. Then they bombed the living crap out of the South. They said, oh, don't worry, go to the South, you'll be safe. And then they bombed the hell out of it. And so the idea that these leaflets, they're dropping the leaflets with the bombs, it's absurd. It has no effect at all. And at this point, it's such an obvious excuse to.
Something that I have to get better at doing is I assumed when I said that he was going to take all of them into context: the leaflets, the phone calls, the humanitarian corridors, the humanitarian pauses during the day for the corridors, right? But he harped on the leaflets. I need to make sure, I think next time I have a conversation, especially with someone who's as talented in media as Cenk, is to be like, does the my strongest point, not just list them, but finish with the strongest point and ask the direct question: does the evidence of humanitarian corridors and pauses are proof against the notion of a genocide? I should have been very specific, and I wasn't, and I'm kicking myself in the head over that.
Pretend you're not doing terrorism when you're obviously doing terrorism. So here, when I say terrorism, like you make a good point about kill ratio. It's an unfortunate conversation. It feels awkward, but you're not wrong. If it turns out you killed 80% terrorists and you had 20% collateral damage, again, heartbreaking, but a little bit more justifiable. If it turns out you're overwhelmingly killing civilians and you happen to get a couple of terrorists, but hey, then that's ethnic cleansing and that's genocide, etc. For example, hold on, let me finish the thought. So Hamas, actually, people don't know this very much because barely ever reported in America, killed about 840 civilians and 300 some odd troops, IDF soldiers, right? So their kill ratio was about 2/3 civilians. So that's awful, horrible. I condemned it on day one massively. I condemn it to this day, right? Dumb strategy, immoral strategy.
I actually don't know, Thomas, where he's getting the numbers. Those numbers seem a bit inflated to me because even though a lot of people who were murdered were soldiers, they weren't in their capacity as soldiers, right? They were either like off, they were reservists. That's very different than those who are in their bases, armed and whatever it is ready, as opposed to people who are just reservists in their homes or at the Nova Music Festival. So I don't know where he's getting those numbers. And that was one of the challenging things in this conversation, that it wasn't a debate and there was no real way to specifically argue statistics. So the best way is to talk about, well, if this is true, let's assume that what you're saying is right. Let's assume what we're saying is right. And that's a challenge that I have to get better at navigating. It's very difficult, actually.
Strategy wrong in every way. Now, Israel has killed about 27,000 civilians, a little bit more now, and IDF claims that about 9,000 of them are Hamas fighters. Now, that's a comical claim. I don't know any objective person that believes that it's as high as 9,000, and they do from time to time say, we haven't done a lot of damage, we haven't gotten any of the leaders, they haven't really been able to go into tunnels. But even if you take it at face value, that they killed 9.
That's not true, by the way. Israel reports getting the leaders all the time. They haven't gone Sinwar, but Israel reports on the assassination of leaders all the time. This is one of the things that they're proud of, actually. This is one of the things that's, I think, helpful for their narrative. Oh, we're getting the leaders. So they absolutely have. I don't know why he would say that, but there was no point in challenging it at the moment.
9,000 Hamas fighters. Well, that's 2/3. So now they have the same civilian kill ratio as Hamas, except they've now killed 25 times the number of civilians.
And this part actually fucks up his own argument because, correct, if there's a similar death toll, then why is it that Hamas is considered, what they did was a genocide, and what the Israelis are doing aren't? What's the difference? Well, Hamas, there are open letters in their handbooks, open sayings on TV, openly saying, yeah, we did this. We're proud of killing the Jews, We want to kill the Jews. We'll do it again. They have openly said this. The leadership, the direct leadership, plus manifestos in soldiers' hands, instructions, etc., etc. It's also important to mention that Israel's government is a democracy, which means that while there are political leaders in Israel who say this genocidal bullshit, don't get me wrong, they don't speak as the government. Well, Hamas's leaders speak as the government, and those are very two different things. Right,
which in my mind makes them 25 times the terrorists.
But it's almost like we're negating the intent behind it, right? Because we know that let's just say, because most kill death ratio, I don't want to say kill death, sounds like I'm playing Call of Duty. Most civilians to combatant ratios in urban environments do look about 70%. I did some research on this in general. I was trying to look at different military history, and it ends up being around 70 to 80% in urban warfare.
But clarify, do you mean modern, or do you
modern, like in the 80s, 90s,
Okay. Yeah, because if you go back to World War II and World War I,
it's different. Yeah. By the way, the civilian death toll casualties in World War II are like 95%. Like, they just bombed civilians. No one gave a shit about anything. So, but in urban environments, it seems to be about a 2-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1 ratios of civilians to combatants, which is kind of terrifying. When you really think about it, like in an urban environment, civilian death tolls are really unbelievable. Like, that is terrifying. Total war which just means war that encompasses all elements of life. It's not like we go into a battlefield and duke it out, right? That was actually a pretty civil way to do war when we think about the way we do war, which is a total war. Everything, rockets being sent at civilians, infrastructure, it's a very different style of combat and war. It's real brutal. The way we do war is horrific. It's insane. Maybe there's a notion to going back and, I don't know, playing lacrosse with each other instead of fighting. You see 90% death rates. You see insanity. You see 90% of the people getting killed are civilians. It's absurd.
That's right.
Modern war. And let's just start. In an ideal world, I would like zero. I mean, I would want to move towards that society, of course, 100%. But for me, just the brute ratio within itself doesn't equivocate, especially.
Well, then let me ask you something. Then does that excuse Hamas? They have the same ratio as Israel.
But again, ratio it might be a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. We know that Hamas, and it's not up to the question, had the intent to go kill civilians. It wasn't hidden. That was fair game. And it's also true that Israeli leaders like Netanyahu talked about Amalek, which is psychotic to bring up. Other people in the Israeli parliament, far right extremists, have talked about turning Gaza into a parking lot. Some guys said they want to drop a nuke on it. And that exists, especially within a democratic society. You have these outlying voices. Heck, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene talking about taking away Ilhan Omar from her seat, which she's a citizen. She has representation. She has a duty to her constituents, which I was very loud about on Twitter. But that, to me, is the difference. It is the brute numbers, is the brute facts enough to say, yes, genocide? That's, for me, a problem that I can't get over because of the intentional part.
Yeah. So I get why you're coming at it from that way, but to be honest, I think you're thinking about it the wrong way. And I think that Israel focuses on, and America also focuses on that, partly to deceive people.
So what he says here is that, there's a cat in my room. I have to get that cat out of here. But what he's basically saying here is that that's deceitful. To talk about the intentional part behind the condition that makes genocide true, for lack of a better way of saying it, as deceitful and irrelevant, I don't think it is. Maybe we can have a different category of instead of calling it genocide, I don't know, poorly, terribly waged war, and you can get fined for that. Maybe in that sense, we can start fining countries and sanctioning countries based on their civilian combatant death toll, which at the same time, saying it out loud can kind of say, well, that becomes then for a legitimate military strategy. But for him to say it's deceitful is kind of stripping the term of its meaning. For what posterity reasons? For winning reasons? Like, what's the reason here? I can't think about it.
So I'm not denying that Hamas's intent was to kill both soldiers and civilians. I think that's obvious. But let's look at Israel's intent. So I just told you, if you take IDF propaganda, they have the same ratio as Hamas. If you don't believe IDF propaganda, their ratio is much, much worse. But they claim don't have intent. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe them at all. At all. You destroyed 70% of the buildings in Gaza. They blew up a university with a improvised, like with a controlled explosion.
Yes.
Why are you destroying their schools? And then you're telling me you're not ethnically cleansing them, as I see with my own eyes, and the whole world sees with our own eyes, that you're ethnically cleansing them.
I mean, they claim that they're blowing up infrastructure. They blame that they're blowing up specific areas.
But what does the university have anything to do with Hamas? And they didn't show that there was any tunnels underneath the university. They never showed that there was any tunnels under the 16 cemeteries that they desecrated. So you would have to be the most gullible man alive to say, even though they're killing more civilians than 25 times the number of civilians and a worse civilian to soldier ratio than Hamas is, and they've just pulverized the place, I believe their intent is angelic, and they just keep missing. Oh God, we missed again. We missed again. We missed again. We missed again. It's preposterous. It's laughable. No one in their right mind would believe that.
I'm sorry, Cenk. That's not an argument. You didn't make any argument there. You simply said, for anyone to believe otherwise would be ridiculous. I can't imagine any other scenario where this would be the case. That's not an argument, Cenk. That's called appealing to your ignorance. That's what you did there. That's all right. Get better. You gotta sharpen up. Right? That was just him appealing to his ignorance. There are legitimate claims of buildings and areas that they've blown up where they blew up the tunnels and they blew up the buildings around it, and that does happen.
I think that is rare, but of course it happens. So whenever they blow up a tunnel, for example, I believe it a lot more because the tunnels are where Hamas is. And so when you blow up a residential building, it doesn't hurt Hamas at all, and they know that because the tunnels are underneath the building and are totally unaffected.
But what if the residential building had an entrance?
Tunnel, right? I believe you that on your intent. If you blow up a residential building and it doesn't affect the tunnel at all, you're an obvious liar and a terrorist.
Well, a lot of residential buildings, from what I've looked at, and of course everyone here can be wrong. That's what the whole point. That though they had access points from the tunnels, so you hit the residential building, that access point is eliminated from that tunnel, and you can. Why do you just don't buy it?
No, so brother, propaganda. You're telling me that the only way to take out an access point to a tunnel is to blow up a residential building and kill 327 people inside?
I don't know where he got that 327 people. I think he's bringing up a number from the tweet that Travis was talking about earlier, right? I don't know where he's getting that numbers. He likes to throw out numbers. I kind of just try to ignore them, but. Let's just say they took down a building that had 327 people in it because of an access to a tunnel. Do I think that's wrong? Yes. I think if that actually happened, yes, I think that is wrong. If I was a commander and someone told me, hey, there's 327 people in this building, there's a tunnel access, and they shot it because of that, I don't know if I would be okay with that. I'm not in that position, luckily, but I'm not cool with that. If we say, hey, there's 327 people in this building, there are soldiers coming in and out of that building, it seems like they have a tunnel access point in there, our information says blah 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 blah, we can't advance our whatever soldiers or tanks because this building is a hot point. They dropped a dummy bomb, they dropped leaflets, they made calls, a few hours, 5, 6, 8 hours, 12 hours go by. Would I be then okay with blowing it up? That is also a difficult question. I would be more likely to say yes. How about that? And I think that is an important thing to understand, that warfare and these things are really difficult questions. Like, do you have an obligation to your soldiers? Do you have an obligation to minimize your casualties? How do you weigh that against these are military ethical questions that are not simple. And I think that a lot of times we speak about these conflicts in a way that is so simple and that is so myopic, where like the default condition is one where, it's like in high school, someone punches you and you punch them back and you both get in trouble. That never felt right to me. I don't quite have the words to try to articulate what I'm trying to say, but I'll think about it more later.
That can't be right. That's
It's
the most monstrous thing I've ever heard.
It's lower risk to IDF personnel.
Now, maybe that's right. They're saying, I don't care.
Myopic. I think it's just myopic. It's talking about it too simple. It's too low resolution. It can't deal with the nuance of these problems. And I think that's really how we should see the way we view a conflict or how we talk about it. Can we actually make sense of this using this language, using models, using these perspectives?
I'm just going to murder all these civilians to avoid at best, in a best case scenario, to avoid a tiny bit of risk for the IDF, extra risk. There's plenty of risk.
Why doesn't the country have a duty to not let any of its soldiers die if they push, they door knock, they drop leaflet, they called an evacuation? If all of that is, I know you don't believe it, but let's say that is true. Would you then be saying, maybe that is a legitimate strategy? Or if rockets are being sent from an area, you stop the rockets. This. I forgot to ask you. In the Scouts building, which we know they had rocket installations in. During those scenarios, you would say, if you were a leader, you would do the same thing, would you not?
Yeah.
He would. Okay, so Cenk would. He would. I forgot I asked him this. He would.
I would. Okay. Yeah. If they could prove that they actually made a significant effort to get the civilians out of harm's way and they were shooting at a military target, then I totally get it. Right. But whenever, even when they do propaganda, they bring CNN camera crews in and they go, oh, you see, there's the tunnel access. And CNN's like, no, there's no tunnel access. And they're like, oh, you see.
I don't know why he keeps saying there's no tunnel access. I don't know why he keeps saying that. We're going to have to do a little Googling afterwards. That's annoying me that he says that. I remember seeing a video about this. No, I could be misinformed, but I remember seeing it and it seemed pretty clear cut. Like it was satellite images, drone footages. There's a video of the drone around the cemetery going in and out of the tunnel. Like I'm pretty sure it was pretty clear cut like that.
See, the artillery was in the cemetery. They're like, no, it wasn't. That's just a random picture. They say, oh, we went into the hospital. We found a command center. Here's 2 flak jackets and a pair of boots. You guys are comical. This propaganda is like the worst propaganda I've ever seen. So it's not credible at all. And one other thing I have to say, when we talk about intent, let's talk about Israel's intent in occupying the Palestinians for 75 years. That is the core of the problem. And it is evil. It is wrong. It is brutal. It is oppression. So don't tell me you have the right intent when you kept these people in an open air prison, 5 million people, for 75 brutal years. And every empire can claim we had a right to defend ourselves. That's what the Turks could say about the Armenian genocide. That's what everybody, by the way, even the Germans said that they were defending themselves. It is literally what every empire says, and it's not credible.
So let me say a couple things here. So first, let's talk about that. I mean, I think you would agree that just because empires have claimed similar things doesn't mean those claims are similarly reliable, right? Like the Jews hurt the Germans by virtue of existing, and Israel can colorably claim that having Palestine so close by without security hurt them because suicide bombers. So I'm not saying that makes them correct. I'm just saying it's not exactly the same thing.
No.
And I think John actually, I think, asked a really good question here, because I think that what he was asking boils down to the notion of justification, or as opposed to like valid justification. People justify things all the time. We give reasons for things, right? A big thing I like to tell someone when I'm telling them why I did something, I go, I'm giving you the reason. I'm not giving you the excuse, right? So we can justify, we give reasons for things all the time. The idea is, can we give them legitimate justifications? Do those justifications mean anything?
Two things are the same, and those examples are very different. That's right.
Yeah, of course. But the real question I wanted to ask you is, as a person who is not as versed in this as you or Don, although I have done a little bit of research, is let's pretend for a second that it is a genocide. Not pretend, but assume to go your way. And let's say that the IDF does have this intent. What do you think the motive is? Because looking at the historical record, again, from the outside, it seems like Israel has offered Palestine two-state solutions, peace deals, stuff like that, repeatedly and incessantly, and they've walked away from the table every time. So to me, I don't really understand what Israel's motive would be to cleanse the area. They've tried to give it, again, you're shaking your head, so I can't wait to hear what you say, but from my experience and from the knowledge base of many people who are somewhat casual about this, Israel has attempted to make peace deals and has attempted to give the area away to Jordan and Egypt. So again, explain to me the motive here.
Yeah.
Explain to me what their motive is, especially in light of this historical record or seeming historical record.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First is there is no Israel. There is different factions within Israel.
What is when he said that I started laughing so bad about it, but he's like, there is no Israel, there's different political factions, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, because it's a democracy. So you say there's no real America because really it's two different political factions, or is it really not Italy? Is it really not England? What does that even mean? It's not like what does that even actually mean, Cenk? There's not even a real Israel because there's different political factions within it.
In light of this historical record or seeming historical record.
So there's a lot to unpack there. First is there is no Israel. There is different factions within Israel.
That's such a meme.
There is no
That's
monolith.
such a meme. I have to clip that. There is no Israel. It's getting to me. It's actually really funny.
There is no the Jews, Israel, right? As there is no the America. Dick Cheney is very different than Barack Obama. And so we have a lot of different perspectives here in America, and there's a lot of different perspectives in Israel. So if you say Yitzhak Rabin was genuinely trying to make peace, I totally agree. Okay. But if you say Ariel Sharon or Netanyahu was genuinely trying to make peace, comical. Although I would give it to Sharon a lot more than I would give it to Netanyahu. And Sharon is a butcher, but Netanyahu makes him look like child's play. So at least Ariel Sharon did something to get out of Gaza. It was very incomplete and wound up causing a lot of damage the way that he did it. But it depends on the facts. It depends on what faction they're coming from. So there is no monolith that's Israel, right? So that's point one. So point two is these offers of peace deals that everybody keeps using, in my opinion, as talking points. I was there. I've been around. I'm the grandfather of a lot of these movements, right? So I've been around a long time.
Right. So point one, let me just talk about something for what there's no monolith. Got it. We agree. I don't know what is important about that statement for what about it he's about to say next. Maybe there's a good reason for it, but I have no idea.
We've been doing the show 22 years. I've been doing this overall for over 30 years, right? And I was there and covering it in terms of those peace offers. And even Bill Clinton said after the most viable one that it was the Israelis who blew that deal up. Okay.
Some people say it's because of the Israelis. Some people say it's because of the Palestinians. If you watch people like Vosh, they're going to pull up the quotes by those say it was the Israelis' fault. You're going to watch people like Destiny. It's going to be people who bring up quotes about the fact that it was the Palestinians' fault, and different analysts who gave up the positions. What's a more important question is that peace fell through. That's the important thing to take away, right? Because what's happening here, and this is where the narrative building starts happening. Who's ultimately at fault? Who's ultimately at fault? We're talking about geopolitics. What do you mean who's ultimately at fault? It's what conditions are causing this to be the case, right? That's how we think about this. What are the conditions that are causing this to be the case? What is happening geographically? What is happening environmentally? What is happening economically that are causing these peace things to fall through? What isn't actually existing? That's how you think about these issues. You want to find out who's at fault, then now we're just playing punditry on television. That's really what we're doing. And I think this is the same thing that people do with people in the Muslim world all the time. Well, who's at fault? It's the Muslims' fault. It's the Muslims' fault. No, stop. Why are you thinking about it that way? It doesn't fucking matter. We understand people are at fault. Understand, like, oh, they didn't right. They shouldn't have done this, right? They shouldn't have done this. Fine. Just like a person who robs a store when they're 17 years old, they shouldn't have done this. They're at fault. Fine, we can have that. But is that really going to help us deal with crime? If we figure out that they're at fault, is that how we're going to fix the crime problem in this country? Whatever, I can rant about that for a mile. And this is why I feel sometimes annoyed during this conversation from my fellow progressives, because I always found progressives to be people who think that way. But around some geopolitical conflicts, it seems to be finger pointing once again that rules the narrative, as opposed to how do we solve it. and what are the ways to understand how to solve it. That's really what matters.
Okay, so now you don't hear that anymore, but you can go back and search it, and you can see the quotes. Okay,
well, I'm curious.
So an offer of peace is a great start. I love it. And I wish we could go back to that, right? And I've offered a solution for how we can go back to that. But doesn't it depend on what's in the deal? The answer is obviously yes, right? So, for example, if the peace offer, as it was in many of the instances, is okay, now we took half of this land back in 1948. Now we're going to take an extra 10%, 20% of what remains of West Bank or Gaza Strip. Well, that's not a very good offer, right? So what if they said we're going to take 90% of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, and they go, well, I offered a peace deal. These sons of bitch Arabs won't take it, right? No,
I think a big part of that was also because there were already people, families, communities living there, and it would be logistically A, disastrous, and B, to just be like, everyone get up and go.
Yeah.
There are many towns like the one that I grew up in, which was literally like one side across the Green Line, right? I grew up in Oranit, a place in Israel. Now, while I understand that I literally lived in a settlement in an occupied area, I also recognize, well, there were families living there and kids living there, families who had nothing to do, who just grew up, in the 90s, who raised their kids. I think that there needs to be a way to also, you can't just get up, hey, 1 million people get up and go, move to a different area.
No, I would do that in a second.
You would do that in a second.
Yeah, and so
in a second, Cenk would tell 1 million people to get up and go. Right? I can't see that as a part of the solution. I don't think that's a solution. I can't see that as right. Innocent families. That to me is retributive. It's caveman-like, honestly. It's really, as you did this, it's looking at geopolitics and treating it like a real caveman. Gross.
First of all, if Israel says, hey, we're going to keep 4%, 6% of the West Bank, etc., for the settlers or what for their other needs, if I'm the Palestinians, I do that deal. And in fact, if I was Arafat, I would have done the deal anyway.
So what's your point? You said if the deal is bad, you don't do the deal. If the deal is good, you do the deal. So if you would accepted that deal, then you have to think it's a good deal, right? Isn't that how that works? So why is the deal bad? I'm right. This is what I'm saying. It doesn't make sense here.
Even though it was not a great deal, because I, unlike Arafat, understood you're never going to get right of return, and you're only going to lose power and leverage as the years go on, because you have no military. They have a massive military, and they're backed by the greatest military ever built, the U.S. military. Dumbass, take the deal, even though that deal sucked. Okay, so I'm not saying that the Palestinians were angels and brilliant and
don't understand that. How could the deal simultaneously suck and you should take it? It's not what you wanted. Oh, yeah, that's how deals work. That's how compromises work. If you ever try to hold on to like a relationship for more than a year and a half, you realize that's how shit works. Sometimes the deals fucking suck.
And the Israelis were all wrong. No, peace deals are messy, and you don't always get exactly what you want, right? So now, having said that, brother, I have zero sympathy for the settlers. Zero, none. They're religious zealots.
That's not true of all of them, and I think
I don't care.
That's not true of all of them. I'm a bigot, but I don't care. Cenk Uyghur, 2024. I'm a bigot, but I don't care. All of them. I'm a bigot, but I don't care. There are some people who are just either trying to like raise their family, get a home,
go raise it in a place where you're not stealing other people's land. The whole point of the settlements is to steal Palestinian land. Why are they going there? They're going there to take land, which will make peace much harder. And they want the whole West Bank. They want all of Gaza.
But there's a difference between the right. There's a big difference.
That God promised them that land.
This is no different than when when Alex Jones or a far-right Republican stands on television and said that the actions of the Palestinian people, all of them in that place, every single one, they just want to destroy all the Jews. They just want to destroy all the Jews. They want to take every piece of land back from Israel. Is that true? Absolutely fucking not. That is a ridiculous thing to say. How could you possibly say that about the settlers? He doesn't even know what he's talking about. He just literally doesn't know what he's talking about. This is pure bigotry, in my opinion. Pure bigotry. Those who don't
nice
think
job
that,
on stealing the land. Keep
but
it.
but not everyone who moves out to the West Bank when they're young, they turn 18, 19, 20, they're trying to buy a home. Not all of those people are there with the intent to steal land and to spread the Jewish faith. They're not all right-wing radical Zionists.
Then they should move out. I agree with you. Kids don't know, right? And they get to be 18, 19. Well, then you got a choice to make, brother. Are you going to sit there and steal more land, or are you going to go to be a decent human being and go somewhere else instead of trying?
Can you imagine that argument for someone who, I can see that coming out of the mouth of someone who talks about Mexicans, right? Oh, you turn 18, 19, trying to come steal our land, come to live in our country, come illegally through the border. I don't know. I think it's the wrong way to look at it. I think it's the wrong way to look at it.
To create endless conflict and war with Palestinians.
But you're giving so much ownership to people who are just pushed by their material conditions, right? I think that when we look at societies and organizations, we know that it's not just people there championing, and there's economic incentives. A lot of this is because of the way Israel's government, especially under Bibi, has been captured by the right wing, those who want to kick all the Palestinians out of East Jerusalem and make policy based on that, and policy that helps development within the West Bank. But at the same time, I feel that it's very harmful within Israel, within the political nature of it, and a way towards peace to just remove them. I know how much the religious right in Israel became very, very fervent after the removal of people from Gush Katif in Gaza, after they displaced them in Gaza. That brought upon a whole new movement of right-wing Zionism. And I think that there needs to be, in the same way that we view Israel and other nations as affected by their geopolitics, Israelis, in a sense, are just like any other people affected by their geopolitics. So punishing those who are simply victims of a larger geopolitical movement is just wrong to me. I can't see that as being right.
Absolutely not.
I still stand by that. We can't punish individuals for the effects of the world, of the economies. It's insane to hold them responsible like that. It's just wrong. There's nothing else to say. I agree with my past self. High five, hold me, I guess.
I couldn't disagree more. I think the settlers are the most guilty people in this entire scenario. And so I could prove it to you. Imagine the Palestinians, if they were allowed to, which of course they're not, but if they were allowed to, they just moved a couple of million people into Tel Aviv and Haifa. And they said, what? We're settlers now. What? Now it's our land. What do you mean?
That's a serious straw man, because other than really East Jerusalem, where you're actually seeing those policies, and I want to make it clear, if you don't know about the situation in East Jerusalem, you should know. It's wealthy, very right-wing Zionists, usually Americans, who buy homes there way above asking price, go into the area, and then just kind of start dominating it. And the policies in Israel make it impossible for people who are Palestinians to try to buy land there, and vice versa. It's a really fucked up situation. Most settlements aren't happening like that. It's not just 1,000 people moving in and taking people out of their homes. That's a very big strawman of the situation. While I understand what he's getting at and the picture that he's painting a picture.
Okay, now I'm staying, and now it's mine. What? They're innocent kids. They moved in with their parents. So what? Now it's our land. Tel Aviv is ours. Haifa is ours. That's absurd. You can't do that. And so, look, guys, I would kick out all the settlers with not one shred of concern. Oh, is Yahweh going to be upset? And are they? Oh my God, I have to worry about whether. Well, they had planned to murder all the Palestinians and take all their land, but oh golly, gee, some of them were innocent.
Yeah, but that's not. But you're calling my parents murderers. You're calling my parents murderers.
I'm sorry, I grew up in Orange. They should never be settlers.
But
selling nut jobs.
No, they're not. No, they're not. But they're not. The fact, though, they're not. You see, he has no issue doing so. Absolutely. I mean, I think this speaks for itself. Let's just keep watching it. But they're not.
And what the hell are they doing there? What are they doing there?
They wanted to raise a family.
That's the only place to raise a family.
When the economic conditions are difficult, when the economic
people's land,
when the economic conditions,
a million place to raise a family.
When the economic, first of all,
maybe I can
let him go, John. Let him go.
Already, which the town that I grew up in wasn't built it wasn't like people were displaced from the air. While it is an occupied territory right across the green line, It wasn't an area where the people living there were like, we got to kill Palestinians. It was kind of like, it's not totally inside the West Bank. We're against that, but we also want to raise families. And the climate in Tel Aviv and in Netanya is horrible. We can't afford that. This is a good compromise for us, and they move in there. But they're not. We still went, and we went to Kfar Saba.
Why? But brother, be honest. Why?
This is why.
Why there?
Because it was cheap. It was cheap.
Okay. So what?
It's an economic condition.
Hey, listen, man. I think Haifa's cheap. I'm just going to go take it. Would you be okay with it? And go, what? They're just innocent.
I wouldn't punish the people who are doing that. I wouldn't punish the people who are doing that. And after they have homes and they live there, and
you'd let them stay.
I'm personally for a two-state federation between the Palestinians and Israel, who have a supranational government. That's my real point. But I don't think that the solution is punishing innocent families. Just like
they're not innocent. They went there on purpose to take Palestinian land. So I'm not saying like punish them like
this can be mapped on exactly to the way in which radical Republicans talk about undocumented families of immigrants who move into New York, live undocumented, and they go, they're not innocent. They're not innocent. They've broken the law. These families are not innocent. Does that mean we get to punish families, break up homes, take people out of their communities? No. No, you don't. You got to get a button up and a blazer. Do you actually want me to do that, Scott? I don't think I'm going to do that. But if you make me do that, I'll do it. If you make, how about this? If you guys like the video a bunch, I'll do it. I'll wear a button suit and blazer, I guess. That's very YouTube of me to say. Let's do it. Embrace your inner YouTube.
Hurt them? No, but
you're saying just kick them out. You're saying just kick them out.
If I come to your house and I take half of it and I go, well, now I'm innocent after I took it. That's not a thing. You're still a thief.
But individual, the way two individuals relate, the way we deal with individual, morals isn't the same way we view morals and solutions between I didn't have the word there. The way you deal with individual injustice between individuals, the way we deal with conflict with individuals. That's the word I was looking for. Right? You can't compare war to two individuals fighting in the street. Just you can't compare solutions, but I come to your house and take your fridge. It's not the same thing. It's entirely different. Do you not see that?
Well, the other one is way worse because when you take my fridge or take half my home.
Way worse. And this, again, it's this way worse thing. It's this hierarchical thinking that this guy has. What has this guy been talking? Way worse than what? What's way worse than what?
Two people. But not only do the settlers take the land, but they make sure that the conflict never ends. Because whenever it goes to end, the settlers go, no way, we're staying.
And they don't want to leave their homes. Of course they don't want to leave their homes.
Our land, our God, right?
Of course they don't want to leave their homes.
Peace impossible. I'm sorry, but they're the absolute number one biggest problem in this whole conflict. And I love your brother, and I get it. You're a good person. I'm sure your parents were good people. And by the way,
a second ago you said there were fanatical religious zealots who want to take and kill all Palestinians. So I don't know how they can be good people. That doesn't make sense to me.
I don't get what I want. So would I make a peace deal where some of the settlers stay? And yes, that'll drive the Palestinians crazy. But yes, I would do that deal because you make peace with your enemies. You don't make peace with your allies and your friends. You don't get a perfect peace deal.
Wasn't that a part of the peace deal as well? When in the Oslo deals that broke apart, right? That was the idea of keeping some of the settlements there.
And I would have taken that deal. That's right.
But
so what I just about my moral massive misgivings about the settlers, who I think have caused gigantic problems and have done it on purpose and have been incredibly indifferent to the feelings and the lives of Palestinians. Incredibly indifferent. Okay.
I think that there are settlements and other.
So I will leave some settlements if that's what it takes for peace.
I know, but the one thing that troubles me really is that you're willing to paint all of those people there as like immoral, religious fanatics, and I think
know
that
it's
is
your family,
wrong.
so it's super personal.
No, because they're not religious fanatics, not at all.
But they were willing to go into Palestinian land.
They were willing to go and buy a home because it was cheap.
They know that. But do they not know that that's going to make the conflict much harder to resolve? They know that,
but you know that people don't make. But people, right? Not governments, not economies. Human beings are driven by their material conditions. It reminds me of like when right-wingers talk about, but don't they know that they're going to go to jail if they go and shoplift from CVS in New York? And I'm like, well, why are they doing this? Why are people behaving in this way? Why are people behaving in immoral ways? We can't just castigate them as evil, immoral, like, and then punish them like that. There's much more systemic issues for this.
And you're picking an outlier case, which is your family near the border, etc. And I'm saying to you, even in that scenario, I'm sorry, brother, but you cannot go into somebody else's land, cause a giant problem, and then go, well, I wanted cheaper land. But they are still the great minority. You know that. Let me see if you will agree to this. Most of the settlers are religious zealots who believe that God gave them that land, and they will take that land no matter what happens to the Palestinians, and they couldn't care less. And the great majority of them despise the Palestinians.
I think most Israelis despise Palestinians. Let's just make that clear. It's like most Palestinians despise Israelis. These people have been in conflict for 75 years. True. Right? Like that's something that needs to change. That's something that I want to change. From my people who are in Israel, and every time I'm a little bit pro-Palestinian, they call me a Jew hater, self-Jew hater. And then when I am a little bit pro-Israel, I get, oh, you support genocide, you want to kill all the Palestinians. I get that all the time. So
yeah, I believe it.
That's for sure. But I would also say that within the settlement, it depends which ones you're talking about. Any of the settlements around East Jerusalem are occupied by fanatic psychopaths. You go to like where Abraham is Hebron, like that's insane over there. But there's other areas where that's not the case. Do I know if it's the majority? I actually don't have the stats on that. I don't know exactly, but I'm definitely willing to bet, just from like the general Israeli population, the way polls lined up, that yeah, Israel has a 40% community. Most of that 40% is in the West Bank who are right-wing religious zealots. Like, I'm aware of this, who their entire thing is about like, oh, we should go all the way to Damascus or whatever it is. I'm not for that. I just think it's very important to just not paint all of the Israelis or anyone who lives in the West Bank with a broad brush, because I think what that does is it does something similar that the Zionists do to the Palestinians, and just paint them with the broad brush as anti-Israel, anti-hated. They hate Jews. They want to kill Jews. I don't think, and I worry about that. And that's language specifically.
Look, I understand, but in any group, you're going to find outliers.
I was trying to find a really easy way to tell him that he's being a bigot, by being nice, but it was difficult.
People that happen to be there for different circumstances, but overall, the settlers to me are very much like Hamas. And so you can say, hey, there might be good people inside Hamas.
The settlers are very much like
I'm
Hamas.
not going to trust that. And I'm a secular Muslim. So there's a good chance that the fundamentalist Muslims inside Hamas or Al-Qaeda or ISIS or any of those groups would cut my head off in a second as an apostate, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to go just wander into there and go, well, I bet some of them are okay people. Right. So,
but I think that's a disingenuous comparison, because Israel is a democratic state.
No, settlers. Are you kidding me? If I went into Israeli settlers with the opinions that I have, and they know that I have, right? I don't think I walk out alive.
I think it depends where you go. If you're in East Jerusalem, probably get beat up. If you're in Ariel,
no, they kill me.
If you're in Ariel, nothing's going to happen to you. I promise you, nothing will happen to you.
Okay, you could find outliers, but
Ariel is one of the biggest settlements. Correct, it's one of the biggest settlements. Ariel is one of the biggest settlements. If you're unaware of this, Israel is a secular nation. It's a democracy. Like you can walk around the streets you can be whoever you want to be. Arabs can walk in the streets. Like, you're okay. I'm sure if you go to Israel, you spend time in Israel, go visit Ariel, go visit the West Bank, you can do it. Nothing's going to happen to you. Cenk is afraid. I think Cenk is gone by propaganda here. I think Cenk sounds like someone who is afraid that my name is Prager, or my brother, because he has a big nose, should be afraid of going to Istanbul and visiting Turkey. No, I don't think he should be afraid. That doesn't make any sense to me. This is a bit of paranoid, and it reeks a bit of anti-Semitism, in my opinion. He paints an entire group of people as one way, people living in the West Bank, without even knowing about the way the population works there, the different cities of different people. And then says that if he would walk into the area, he would be killed. It doesn't sound that much different in the way that people like Dennis Prager talk about Muslims and being afraid of walking in the street if he's a group of Muslim men in a specific city. It's not that much different.
I have a policy of never going to the Gulf countries because they're run by fundamentalist Muslim dictators. Okay. And I have said things about how secular I am that would anger them greatly. I'm not going to take the chance because I think there's some percentage chance that they would murder me if I go to their countries. So I am not going to go into a settlement filled with religious zealots who hate Palestinians and look forward to stealing their land for Yahweh and then hope for the best. No, there's a great chance they'll murder me.
I think
so.
I think it's a bit hyperbolic. I think
they're a giant cancer, and so it is what it is. And I get that you're from there, but brother, I'm from Turkey. You think my family and friends are happy that I say, yeah, the Turks and Armenian genocide? They're livid with me.
Of course. I mean, but I'm sure if I go to Turkey and I'm like, hey, I'm Jewish from America, I don't think I'll be killed even in the most radical. In most places. I mean, Israel is very secular overall.
Yeah, of course. I could go to Israel. Yeah. I wouldn't go to the settlements.
I mean, depends which settlement, right? There are settlements and there are settlements. Just like there are areas in Turkey and there are like I'm pretty sure if you went to Dubai, you'll be fine, right? Maybe. But if you go into like if you go to Medina, maybe you won't be as fine. Right? Medina is a bit more radical. It depends where you go and where you don't go.
Okay, all right. I think people get it.
Yeah. People get it.
I don't know how we are on time.
I think we digested that.
I think you guys got to the heart of that. I don't know how we are on time, but I did have another outsider question for you.
Yeah, so
we are actually out of time, and John asked him a question. I don't want to gloss over that question. Do we want to hear what John has to say? Honestly, I love you, John, but I don't want to hear what you have to say. That's basically how my thing with Cenk ended. I thought overall, I would say I thought the conversation went well. It went better than I expected, which was fun. I think I was able to highlight some bigotry, which is always fun to do, get someone to sound like they are a bit of a radical. I am going to have to get back to Paul, our guest, who didn't get to us tonight, which is very upsetting, very sad news. I was looking forward to talking to him. I prepared for even staying up a little longer. But thank you, everyone who came. Like, subscribe, share, all of the general YouTube nonsense. I will be live this Friday speaking with Melina, Destiny's ex, which should be a fun conversation. It's going to be around 1 p.m. Eastern time, 10 p.m. Pacific time. And if you want to help me, you can click in the link and send me some tips on Streamelements. And as always, thank you everyone for coming in, and stay thinking.